But away from the spin and back to the reality the campaign seemed determined to avoid for the most. Look, the Albanese government has weakened our military exactly when China is threatening us with naval ships firing their guns. But where have been the defence policies of either side? Now there are reports that Russia, China's ally, has asked Indonesia to let it station several long-range aircraft there, just 1,300 kilometres away from Australia's mainland. This was news to Albanese.
We are ascertaining, having a look at those reports, as the Foreign Minister and Defence Minister have said. We are seeking further information. We obviously do not want to see Russian influence in our region, very clearly.
Peter Dutton was far more damning.
We've seen Russia in action under President Putin in Ukraine. We've seen women and children who have died in Ukraine as a result of decisions of Vladimir Putin. He's a murderous dictator, and we don't welcome his presence in our neighbourhood at all. It is deeply destabilising, and we would want to hear from the Prime Minister about what efforts have been undertaken. Obviously, surely they must have known about this before it's been made public, and if not, then that is a catastrophic failure of Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese. And at a time when the Prime Minister says we live in the most precarious period since the end of the Second World War, we've got a government taking $80 billion out of defence, and that is completely and utterly unacceptable.
But Defence Minister Richard Marles has just put out a statement that the Russians did not put in a request to store their aircraft on Indonesian bases. There's something odd about that I'll discuss later with an expert in this area, but for now joining me is our regular Tuesday commentator, National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt, thank you for your time. This report, and it's by the prestigious US military website Jane's, cited several Indonesian officials, unnamed, but the Defence Minister says Indonesia's Defence Minister denies it. Do you think Peter Dutton then overreacted?
Well, as you say, it was from a reputable source, and we don't know, of course, what will happen with these reports. I still think there are questions for the government to answer about why they couldn't dismiss the issue immediately. There has been this statement just now, so there are those questions to answer. But Andrew, there's also the issue here about what is the government doing to respond to the potential of this. Clearly, this is an issue. Just a few months ago, Indonesia officially joined the BRICS formation. That was the sort of counter to the US formation formed by Brazil, Russia and China just over a decade ago. Now Indonesia's formally a member of that group. So clearly there is an issue here that we should be mindful of. But despite those rising tensions, despite even the Prime Minister's own admissions of those rising tensions, this government has stripped funding away from defence. They've continued to pursue a mad net zero agenda that all of those BRICS countries are not really even paying lip service to anymore. And as a consequence, we've just lost our nickel industry to Indonesia. And I've been raising this issue for over a year. No one else seems to be listening, but the Albanese government imposed a carbon tax on our nickel industry. And meanwhile, China financed the construction of massive amounts of coal-fired power stations in Indonesia, financing a lower cost form of nickel production, which has undercut Australian nickel. And we've gone from being the world's biggest nickel exporter to now barely having an industry in this country, and 3,000 Australians have lost their jobs as well. We need to, if this is, well, I think it is one of the most serious geopolitical moments that Australia has faced since the Second World War, shouldn't we be reassessing our priorities on energy, on industry, on manufacturing, on defence, on all of these issues, rather than the Albanese government's approach, which is to continue to pursue global agendas, to try and change the temperature of the globe, to have open borders migration, instead of focusing on our own national sovereignty and independence.
You raise a couple of issues that I'm going to flesh out later in the show, because you're absolutely correct. There is more to this Indonesian story than the government is letting on. Something really disturbing going on there. Meanwhile, to the Greens, Matt Canavan, they planned a fundraising dance on Anzac Day. On Anzac Day, the West Perth tattoo parlour of all things. And let's not forget, of course, how the West Australian Green Senator Jordan Steele-John defended the pro-Palestinian extremists who defaced the Australian War Memorial. Here he is then.
If we are to believe that the men and women of the ADF gave their lives in wars and conflicts to defend such freedoms, then you have to engage with the reality that protesting, that painting is a form of speech.
The Greens have now cancelled that fundraising event on Anzac Day after a huge outcry. Do you think that was just a mistake on their part or something worse?
Well, to me, Andrew, shows they have terrible instincts. Thankfully, they have responded to that outcry, but how did it even get past first base here? It got past first base because the Greens, as a political movement, are the equivalent of a massive group of spoilt brats. It's like a spoilt child who wants to complain about all the sins apparently their parents committed, but is happy to live off the wealth and generosity of those same parents. I mean, the Greens are only can engage in their democratic right to support Palestine because of the sacrifices that former Australians have made, their ancestors have made, to defend the freedom of this country. But they never pay any sufficient or significant tribute to those sacrifices. Instead, just simply to like to live an easy life and not have to think about the hard sacrifices made to generate that.
Matt, I mentioned the ads earlier at the top of the show, including ones where the Labor Party is attacking the coalition for being too pro-Trump. I wonder, though, much as I deny that allegation, I do wonder why there isn't more robust criticism of Donald Trump. Is it, maybe some people have got a hero worship of him, or they're too scared to criticise him and offend some on the right here? But this pandering to the Russian president by Donald Trump has become obscene. A day ago, he claimed the Russian missile attack on Palm Sunday that killed 34 Ukrainian civilians was just a mistake. And now he blames Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for Putin invading Ukraine and slaughtering his citizens. Have a look.
He's always looking to purchase missiles, He's against, listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Isn't it time the coalition said straight out, Trump's position here is not just wrong, it's immoral?
Andrew, I don't know how wise that would be given the first questions you asked me about Russia's influence in our region. America is our most important ally. Fundamentally, it's their choice to choose who their president is. I think one of the strange things about foreign policy discussions all around the Western world is that everybody seems to think they have the right to dictate what America does with its funds, with its military resources, etc. That's a matter for the American people. I think if we are true friends with America, it would do us some service to actually think a bit deeply about why what Donald Trump is saying, what JD Vance says, what many senior politicians I've spoken to the US, why that's so supported in the US. It's probably because they haven't had a real wage rise since the 1970s. They've got $37 trillion in debt.
That's got nothing to do with it,
Matt, since September 11.
That wasn't what I asked
Andrew,
you.
Andrew, he's a democratically elected president.
There's plenty of reasons.
What he's saying
there are
is
reasons
actually
too
quite
why so many
supported
Germans voted for Adolf Hitler. I don't want to say Trump is Hitler, but there's a lot of reasons why people take political positions.
If that's your comparison, though, Andrew, why are we still in an alliance
retrospect.
with the US? Seriously, that's an absurd statement.
No,
and I'm not. It's not just Donald Trump. It's wrong. It's wrong, Andrew. It's absolutely wrong to say this is Donald Trump. I've had discussions with senior senators, senior congressmen who say exactly the same thing. And this is we don't seem to understand
you can have more people saying the wrong thing. This doesn't make it a right thing, Matt. More people saying the wrong thing is not more people saying the right thing.
That's a matter for the American people. We should look after ourselves, Andrew. We should look after our own country. We should focus a little bit more on that.
Russia, mate, he says Zelensky's to blame for Russia invading his own country. That is a disgrace, and it just embarrasses me that that is seen as now something you can't even deny. It's just extraordinary. I think the coalition's got to wake up to itself on this one.
As a good conservative, Andrew, I'm focused on our country, our region. I think one of the problems, one of the reasons the US finds itself, one of the reasons the US found itself in $37 billion of debt and its reaction against it is because they're getting themselves involved in all of these issues around the world that they don't understand, and I don't want Australia to repeat the same mistakes.
Well, it's a very great mistake to say that Ukraine is to blame for being invaded. And it's a shame that the coalition cannot say that straight out. Well, you didn't deny it, mate, and I thought that was a bit bad, to be honest. Matt Canavan, we'll have more about this, you and I, maybe later, and when I get, perhaps when it's all cooled down a bit. Thank you so much.